Welcome to Speakernomics, the official podcast of the National Speakers Association. I'm Kenneth, Kinney, but friends call me Shark. And like you, I'm a professional speaker and I love listening to Speakernomics. Speakernomics is a professional speaker show that will help you thrive and grow a speaking business so you too can change the world, one keynote session, workshop, and speech at a time. And on this episode, we welcome Dr. Kevin Snyder. And who is the good doctor, really? Well, he's a certified speaking professional, an accredited speaker and distinguished Toastmaster, a best-selling author, a TEDx speaker, a former dean of students, and he's even had a keynote interrupted by a streaker. Dr. Snyder, welcome to Speakernomics. How are you today?
I'm speechless.
There you go. Now, to all my speaking friends, what are your mic drop stories? You know, the ones that will leave them speechless? A good friend once told me that people don't pay you to share your story. They pay you to help change theirs. So how do you go about doing that when you do have to share that story in order to connect with an audience? The question is then, what story of yours will truly leave them speechless? And before we jump in, make sure to go to Speakernomics.com. That's where you can find the tips, insights, and knowledge to help you become a better speaker, build a better business, and get paid to speak. Kevin, let's dive in. First of all, let's talk about the new book, Speechless. Patrick Henry mentioned your name from the main stage at Influence and how you helped put together this book. Profits go to support the NSA Foundation. It has the forward from a friend and excellent speaker and head of the foundation, Patrick Henry. Other than great stories, though, what will reading this book teach speakers to do better and help them improve their speaking business?
Thank you, Shark. Great to be with you, and thanks to all the listeners for tuning in. Look, Speechless was a team effort. Patrick and the NSA Foundation, amazing. Couldn't have done it without their blessing. 100% of the book proceeds go directly to support the foundation. Jamie Nolan and the NSA team, they were helpful. All the contributors, I'm just honored to be part of it. Plus, the publishing company donated their services. So I believe truly this was meant to be. And so not only are you going to hear and read some amazing stories from fellow CSPs and CPAs, but also you're going to hear and read some great perspectives. There's some pitfalls too that we can all learn from. So we packaged it in a kind of speechless, a wide variety, kind of a vignette collection of true stories, what it's really like behind the curtain, but off the stage and on the stage, because as we all know, the audience only sees what they see. They don't see what didn't happen behind this, So I think the book's incredible.
Tell us how you came up with this and how the whole idea came to fruition. Because you pulled together, what is it, 28 people?
28 cats. Speakers. Yeah.
A lot of herding.
A life of its own, like a flywheel or a snowball. But yeah, the origin story is pretty simple. We were at the CSP CPAE Summit in Minneapolis last year, and there was some weather. And the first night, some of us were just kind of gathered and sharing how they got there and how they didn't get there. And next thing you know, it evolved into some other stories of what it's like in travel. And then somebody said, somebody should write a book about what we have to go through to do what we do. And the next day, I remember talking in our CSP roundtable group, just mentioning this as an idea. Jan Spence was our fearless facilitator, and we had some rock stars in our group. And I said, surely there's got to be a speaker who's maybe coordinated this, or there might be another book out there like it. I know NSA's in the past done a few books. And I remember everybody in my group pretty much said, yeah, Kevin, you should do that. I was just given the idea, it wasn't necessarily I wanted to do it. But I remember on the flight home, I typed up some thoughts and notes, kind of did a executive summary pitch, shared it with Patrick Henry, shared it with Jamie, and just said, look, if y'all want to rally behind this could be really something kind of fun. And it kind of can give a lot of exposure, not just to the foundation and to NSA, but also to the CSP and CPAE designation. It has a lot of ripple effect. And luckily, Patrick and Jamie were like, tell us more. I shared it with my facilitator or my CSP Summit group. And anyway, the baby was born, and then the process folded, and a selection committee, and then, talked to my publisher. And she said, we'd be honored to do this pro bono, which was Right Way Publishing. So I need to give them a shout out. And the next thing you know, our goal was to have it done before Influence. And guess what? We got it published and printed a week before Influence. So the best way to sell books is to put them in the contract and then promise that they'll be there. So, right? This, in case, is all about the foundation that we're honored that it can support it.
Well, there were great stories from like Colette Carlson talking about a bomb threat while she's on stage. I know Christine Cashin running into George W. Bush. It was, I mean, they were just great. So it's well worth it. And I love the fact that you're supporting the foundation. And it's such a great cause because it supports all the speakers in need. And I love that part of the community. So I want to pivot then to talk about your own story. You share your own story on the stage. You did it in a TEDx talk. You told me that you share a small bit of your vulnerable story and how that's better connected you to audiences. You share that in a recent TEDx talk even. Well, people need to watch that TEDx talk, but you're not sharing a little bit of vulnerability. I mean, this is a flat out sexual assault story that's hard for a lot of people to take. And it's a really important story that is going to help a lot of people. It's well worth the watch and listen. When you share what happened to you, it's a real sort of visceral punch someone in the gut kind of story. With a story as powerful as that, though, with what happened to you, how do you go about sharing that story from the stage and connecting with your audiences, as you said, with a little bit of vulnerability without making it all about you and too much of a, pardon my explanation, a trauma dump, if you will, to where it's just a woe is me story?
Wow. I appreciate you asking that and just sharing that, because I know a lot of us have been through maybe something similar. And for me, speaking on the Red Dot, the TEDx stage, that was the perfect platform for me as compared to maybe one of my professional speeches, and for years, and by years, I mean over 20, no one had knew that story about me. I have chill bumps right now thinking about it, because I truly believe that the universe was waiting for me to be ready. And I was coaching a couple other TEDx speakers, and frankly, they just weren't ready. The TEDx organizer asked them to stand down and maybe come back next year. And then he came to me and he goes, "Hey, would you be interested in sharing your story?" And he didn't even know that was part of my story. He knew about my depression. He knew about my eating disorder, which I'm open about. But to answer your question, I knew that it was more than just me sharing my story. It was about how over the years, and really through my work in student affairs and through even the stage of platform speaking, when people would come up and talk to you and share their story or say thank you, you knew that you were connecting with them and that we're not alone, right? And so I had to really look deep and cut the onion and go to the core about how I've been able over the years to reframe my past, to literally give it new meaning that I know it can help others, because I'm lucky to be alive. And if it weren't for professional counseling, and if it weren't for the unconditional love of my mom and my dad, I would not be alive today. And so I think about the other 12-year-old boy, the other 12-year-old girl, the teenager, the young professional, the adult, whomever. Just knowing that we're not alone, I mean, that's the power. That's the power of the stage. It's the power of the speech. But it can't be about us. It's got to be about the message. And I hope that if people were to watch my talk, and this is the feedback I typically get, is like they say, "Thank you for sharing your story, because it helped me realize I wasn't alone." And so that's always, that was the purpose. But I literally, when I delivered the talk, I delivered it in the manner I intended. I kept a log of all the practice hours and the editing, and over 100 hours went into that talk, because I was hopeful that talk, if I delivered it in the manner I intended, that it would change lives. And once I delivered the talk and I was proud of it, I then had to sit my mom and my dad down and say, "Look, there's something about me that you don't know, because in about 3 weeks, it's going to be on YouTube." And my mom and my dad they're like, "We never knew." Because look, you don't want to tell people parts of that, And I think that's another reason for us as speakers to just consider how vulnerable can we be for our audiences, as long as it's relevant to our message.
Where do you delineate, because you made a point about that, where do you delineate then with how much you share in your association and corporate and non-TEDx talk, with that bridge of how much vulnerability is the right amount of, pepper and spice to put here as opposed to there.
Right. I mean, absolutely. The audience can't be our therapy, right?
Exactly.
They cannot be our therapy. That's something very, very important. But in my speech, I can only speak for me, but I also know what's touched me. We just came back from Influence, and some of the best speakers were the ones that were the most vulnerable. At least that's what connects with me. But absolutely, we have to know that whatever we might be sharing, it has to be aligned to the point or the message, because otherwise the audience, they might wonder or they might wander and just, know that we're not healed. So for me, in the talk, in my TEDx talk, you kind of know, like, I wanted to reframe, I wanted to think different. And then I have that reverse poem. I don't know if you caught that, where I literally show people, hey, that reverse poem, you goes one way down and then you go back up and it has completely new meaning. I wanted to show, so I found a way to use my story with a practical example that my audiences can not just be inspired by, but hopefully then be able to apply for themselves. And I think when we make our message about how to help them, the what's in it for them, that's the golden, focus. But yeah, do we have to share our story? Absolutely. I truly, and I'll say this too, at least where we are, I feel in 2025, as a man, I feel like I have a responsibility, for my 4-year-old son, for my 6-year-old daughter. I want them to know that daddy we've all gone through stuff, but daddy's not afraid to share it. I want it to provide strength and connection, not weakness and division. So
There. Well, you were a dean of students at a university, and like the rest of us, you quit your job, and I'm sure felt scared and afraid and overjoyed and like 74 other emotions that you could feel. But looking back, what advice would you give to yourself on cutting the cord and going full-time into speaking that would have helped you become that much more successful, that much more quickly? Because we do see a lot of people that are obviously getting into the business. We see a lot of people trying to learn from the lessons that they applied when they weren't getting booked as much, or you know what I mean, trying to get booked more now, but sometimes those lessons get forgotten. So what would you have told your younger self coming out of that job?
Right. My younger self, gosh, for me to take that leap, a couple things had happened. I had to give up speaking to take that job, first and foremost. So prior to that, to me, speaking was a hobby. I wanted to be a dean of students because the dean of students, when I tried dropping out of college my first year, didn't let me. So by the time I graduated, with a near 4.0, I was homecoming king. I was working for admissions. Like I had a complete transformation, and I was fortunate for that, even though I was still carrying some of my baggage from my teenage years. Anyway, long story short, I also was watching one of the greatest that ever lived in speaking, Dr. Nito Cobain. I mean, I was at High Point University as a dean, and watching him speak, I was like, wow. And every time I did, I was like, I miss it. And then one of my students was sharing with me some of the challenges that she was going through, and we had so much in common. And I didn't have really a way to share with her. And then really what got me to launch full-time Shark was when my mom called me one day. I was about 1.5 years in as a dean, and I was a young dean, but my mom calls me and says, hey, Michelle has cancer. And when my little sister, when I was told she was diagnosed with cancer, that's when I realized life's too short. And then I knew, after some reflection, that I knew that I felt like it was time for me to do more than just be on a campus or be in an office. It was time for me to kind of get beyond. So advice I'd give my younger self is number one, join NSA earlier. I didn't even know NSA existed because I was only a college speaker. Yes, I was a successful college speaker. I was a top 10 speaker for several years with Campus Speak, an amazing speakers bureau in the collegiate market. But speaking to me was just a hobby. Advice I'd give to myself was learn the business of speaking earlier, because a great speech is a prerequisite to a great speaking business. I'm not saying I had a great speech. It was working for me. It was called passion, persistence, and the price is right. but it was a fun motivational message. I didn't know how to align it to corporate, right? That was one of my first struggles for probably the first year or two. And every time I got on stage, I had imposter syndrome. I can't tell you how many presentations I wanted them to be over before I was even introduced because I felt like a fraud. I was like, most of my audiences at the time were HR. I got involved with Sherm, another NSA great, Morrison. At the time, he lived in Morrisville. He introduced me to Sherm. I never even heard of Sherm. I was so green, I didn't know it. All I had was passion, and I had some prior experience in college speaking. Never had done a corporate engagement, but I knew I had to open up. So what I would have done much earlier to answer this real shortly would be, who can teach me the business of speaking? Like, where can I be around other speakers who understand that there's a business side to this? That's for sure what I would have done, because I didn't know what I didn't know. And most of what I learned the first couple of years were by making mistakes. And as my dad told me, hey, son, some lessons are just expensive. I had to pull, after that first year, it might look like a success story. I had a lot of engagements. I was busy, but I literally had to pull money out of my 401k to survive that first year. Didn't know what I was doing.
It's amazing how many people are passionate about it when they jump into it, but it's not. We continuously learn the business, but it's like they go in without any. There's so many people I know that go in without any clue as to the workload it's going to entail and everything else. And then they struggle because they don't know how tough being an entrepreneur is. So
a great metaphor too. It's like planting a garden. A garden doesn't grow overnight. And so I always caution people too, hey, unless you have prior speaking experience, kind of like I did. I had some of the techniques. I knew that there was I'd seen Zig Ziglar in person several times, had a chance to speak with Zig Ziglar one time, literally bumped into him in a bathroom, and we sat down and we chatted. I was like, he was the kind of speaker I wanted to be like. So I stalked him, and I studied him and watched video, him, John Gordon, John Maxwell, Les Brown's, but I still didn't, I was fortunate I could go back into it, but I could not have done that. I could not have launched full-time into speaking if I didn't have some prior experience. So planting that garden overnight is really hard, if not impossible to do. The laws of nature can teach us a lot.
Yeah, I would say the same thing about Zig. I think Zig is probably the worst example for me because I saw him and immediately wanted to be a speaker after seeing how brilliant he was on stage twice. Yeah. And if I had jumped in at that moment without trying to figure out the business, I would be broken out of the business because it took a long time for him to get to where he was. So, all right. Yeah. Now I want another question. You started off in college speaking. How did you go about sharing your story to an audience like college students and then taking that to the association and corporate world of speaking and really kind of figuring out that bridge? Because there are a lot of people that live in, each of these universes and don't necessarily cross the streams, if you will, but you're doing a lot of that in several different groups.
Great question. And I recognize how fortunate I was coming from the college background where, every audience needs to be motivated, right? They need to be engaged. Even if you're a very technical, industry-centered, even then your audience needs to be alive, right? There needs to be that heartbeat. I'm more on the motivational keynote side, but the content still has got to be deliverable that has impact and relevance. Anyway, point is, starting with students, and also I hired speakers. So I learned the business of speaking, and I didn't know this until about 1 or 2 years in, where I was like, wait a minute, I actually know a lot more than I think I do because I used to be the meeting planner at a college campus. I was hiring speakers for student leadership conferences, orientations, athletic events, fraternity and sorority events, admissions events, homecomings, plus. And so, how I selected speakers, well, what was I looking for? And one of my rules of thumb, even with students, would be, no matter how many emails we get from the speaker or pamphlets, if we've not seen the speaker, let's wait and see, because a demo video could look pretty good, but they're not. So anyway, I learned the business side of it. And then the transition to corporate was interesting. I don't know if some people call it luck. Some people would say it was divine intervention. But when I got connected and was really by my friend Morris about Sherm, the Society for Human Resource Management, well, they have a whole student division to SHRM, aspiring HR professionals. And I got into SHRM through the student regional conference. So it was at one of those regional conferences where someone from the SHRM national organization was in attendance. They came up to me afterward and said, well, hey, you're pretty good. Would you want to speak at some of our chapters? And I thought, sure. And I remember talking with them later, and I said, well, if I were, and I want to, but help me understand better, what are some of the, since you've seen me speak, can you tell me, maybe give me some tips and insights on how I could tailor that similar presentation for a professional audience? And they sat down with me and kind of guided me through. And next thing I know, I'm getting invited to speak at one of the largest SHRM conferences in the country. And enter imposter syndrome. And I was at the very end of a long day, employee litigation, healthcare reform, policy, compliance. I'm thinking they're going to boo me off stage. What am I doing here? I get up, I deliver it, ending keynote, longest line, still to this day, longest line of people I've ever had waiting in line. They said, thank you for just having fun with us. Loved your Price is Right story. It was like, wow, maybe I'm making this more complicated. So again, yes, I had to position it, whereas I think for students, it's motivation, give them some relevant tools, for college success and beyond. For professionals, it's about how can I help them solve problems they may or may not even be aware of. How can I help them in their day-to-day as a blank professional? And as long as I can do that, then maybe even 80%, 90% of my program's the same.
So a question I want to ask you from a previous guest is, how do you go about generating a continuous flow of leads, real ones, for your business, whether it's speaking, coaching, consulting, facilitation, workshops? How do you keep the flow coming?
3 words. Ready? Deliver an extraordinary speech. Forward. I'm kidding. Yeah, forward. But no, seriously, I truly feel a great speech will be talked about. A great speech, it will refer itself. And, when I first started speaking, my first keynote to the college was June 2nd in the year 2000. And the reason I remember that is it was the worst day of my life. Like still remember the back sweat dripping down my back and be like, oh, this, but I still kept at it. I knew that there was something there. But back then there were no CRMs to my knowledge. There was no QR codes. There was no, a lot of the things that we have now, there were no ways to buy lists. We have a lot of this stuff now, and some of it's useful. A lot of it's also very noisy, right? So I go back to for me at least, I can only speak for Kevin, and I say that very frequently, just from my experience. But it's also what I truly believe has led to, most of my business being referral, because I know if I'm speaking, number one, I got to be speaking to get referred to speak. If I'm not speaking, I'm missing out on referral opportunity. If they found value in me and they want to talk about me or refer me, yeah, there's some systems I can put in place now to help capture leads in the speech. How to be more effective at outreach and follow through. For me, even follow-up is essential. I don't even believe LinkedIn was around, when I first got in, and nor did I understand it back when I went full-time in 2012. But I truly, truly believe a great speech will be referred, but also for a speaking business, a great speech is a prereq. So it's kind of like, how do I build continuous flow? It's like, I focus on just delivering the best value I can. I spend so much time on the prep end. There's some things I do to best know my audiences and what the meeting planner is expecting, so that hopefully they're getting text through my speech. Where'd you find this guy? It's like, that's the whole point. Because there's a lot of other bells and whistles that can really make this a lot more expensive, as well as a lot more intimidating, that we're maybe not good enough yet, or we need to have part of the business of speaking is just to have a great speech and to know your audience.
Well, Kevin, what is a question that you would like to ask a future guest on Speakernomics?
I love the story behind the story. or the stories behind the story. Like this, the story of achievement's great, but what's the perseverance there? So I guess my question to somebody in the future would be, what's a moment in your life where a N-O, turned into a new opportunity?
That's great. Well, let's do a quick recap then based on Kevin's doctoral advice. Number one, whether you read the book Speechless or not, you got to get it. Support the foundation that supports speakers in need. And in the pages and the words, we can all learn from the pitfalls and the true stories behind the curtain. The audience only sees what's on stage, not the sausage-making process. Learning from successful speakers with those kind of stories to help they recovered to help understand how we do what we do is really important to help you do what you do even better. Number two, people want to share their story from the stage, but Kevin adds how it's about them sharing their story, focusing on the connection and cutting deep to reframe the past and a story that's important to helping others connect. The audience is not your therapy couch. Focus the story on the message and don't make it just about the messenger. It has to align with them and provide a practical example and tactic. Number three, speaking successfully is not a hobby. It's a calling that should pull you so hard that it makes the career cord cutting, not a question as to should you, but how do you do this successfully? Kevin reminds us that life's too short as well. His advice is to join NSA earlier. Have a great speech, not a good speech with just passion, but learn the business and how to market and profit with a great speech. Kevin, looking forward to seeing you again at Influencer or Thrive coming soon. Any last closing thoughts before we speak ourselves off this stage?
Don't stop believing. Number one song of all time, but it's also the number one determinant of our success. Believe in yourself.
Absolutely. Friends, make sure to join us at Speakernomics.com and let your voice be heard. I am Kenneth Kinney, your host of the National Speakers Association's podcast, Speakernomics, and this has been another fantastic episode of the show. Thank you, Dr. Snyder, for your service to NSA and for lending your voice to the show. And everyone listening, thank you for the privilege of your time. And remember, Speakernomics is a podcast where you'll learn to speak, get paid, repeat.